Hey guys, Brendzun here. Now, over the beginning of 2023 and up to the end of 2023, I got quite a few comments asking about my video settings for Warframe, my in-game settings. How do I make the game look as good as I make it look? Apparently, it looks better than what other people have. I didn't really think so, but I had already done a graphics guide video for performance and prettiness before, but it does now bear redoing because there have been some changes over the years. So I'm going to go through everything that I do to get the game to look the way I get it to look. And I'm also going to explain some extra steps that I do that makes it look just slightly a little bit better just to pretty up for YouTube. So essentially, I'm going to show you what the game looks like for me in game. And then I'm going to show you what it will look like for you when you watch it on YouTube. And I'm going to show you the different comparisons. So that's going to be near the end of the video, really, just after I've detailed all of the changes that I do. So let's get into this, and we begin with the desktop. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is start by opening up Nvidia control panel. AMD users should have something that is somewhat adjacent to this. If they don't, it's not too important because what I'm basically going to force through the Nvidia control panel, you can pretty much force through the Warframe launcher, but there are going to be a few other tweaks just for the sake of my PC that I'm going to do. That isn't so much going to affect the game itself. So you can feel free to copy this if you wish, but we're just going to go straight into our control panel. Shouldn't take too long to open. And then manage 3D settings. Now in global settings, what I'm going to do here, what I have is background application max frame rate is at 60 frames per second. This is so when Warframe isn't the active window and I'm doing something, say, on a web browser or in Discord, then the game would actually run down to 60 FPS because I don't need my GPU rendering 165 frames while I'm not actively tabbed into the game. So that's just basically to save on some heat being dumped into my room depending on how long I'm tabbed out of the game. Power management mode here as well, if you just scroll down a little bit. This is on adaptive. I think this one is a default setting, but I leave it globally to adaptive. So that's just, and that, again, if I'm not active in a game, then my GPU won't use its full power. If I go back into the game, then because of the game setting that I have in program settings, then it will ramp back up. So going into program settings, this is where we're going to make the changes to Warframe. You're going to want to make sure that it is warframe.x64.exe, not the Warframe launcher or any other executable that looks like Warframe. You want this specific one, otherwise nothing will work. Now, just hit the drop down menu and find it there. If you can't find it here, then you can just hit the add button, and this does take like a couple of seconds just to come up, and then it should appear in this list because this is an exhaustive list of everything that you've basically been doing on your PC. If it does not show up here, you can hit browse and you can go to your Steam installation folder, which would be Steam Library, Steam Apps, Common, Warframe, and then it will be here. And that's what you want to do. You just want to hit open and then add selected program. And this is where we're going to make just one change. Again, make sure it is warframe.x64.exe. We're going down and I'm just going to put this on prefer maximum performance. So when Warframe is the active window, it will use my full GPU power, but otherwise, when Warframe isn't my active window, or if I'm not tabbed into a game or anything like that, my PC isn't basically stressing out using all of its GPU power for no reason if I'm just sitting on the desktop. Once you're finished with that, down here there will be like an apply button or something, so just make sure you hit that. Next will be Warframe itself. So we're just going to open up the launcher, and this is where AMD users can also benefit. So if you don't have the power management mode thing that you can do in your driver software for your GPU, just hit in the top right, there's that little cogwheel, just hit that. GPU preference, high performance, that is exactly what I did in the control panel, but I prefer having it on two fronts just in case. Graphics API, DirectX 12 beta. DirectX 11 is being phased out pretty soon. I'm pretty sure this year in 2024 it is being killed off. There was an issue with AMD GPUs and DX12. We did recently have a hotfix that I think may have fixed that. So if you have an AMD GPU, look into that, but I recommend the DX12 beta API. Over here in settings, full screen, I have this turned off, but basically if you have full screen set in-game or set in the launcher, the game will force itself into full screen. I prefer borderless full screen for Warframe, so that's what I have that set up as. Shader cache, I have enabled. This, as the name suggests, allows shaders to be cached to whatever the drive that your game is installed on, I believe. Bulk download and aggressive download, this is just for downloading patches. You're going to want that turned on. Launcher GPU acceleration, this basically uses your GPU to power what's going on in the launcher. You can have this on or off, it doesn't really matter because the launcher goes away after the game launches. And allow network caches, I believe this is just to allow faster downloading anyway. Another two important things is the download cache itself. To verify and optimize it after every major update, I will first verify it and then optimize it. This does take about 5 to 10 minutes depending on your system and also depending on how long you've gone without doing this. This can clear up a lot of useless dead files that are no longer used by the game, that are still sitting around and floating in the installation directory. Sometimes after a major update, if you haven't done this, just as the patch is finished installing and you're about to hit play, a little pop-up will come saying, hey, do you want to verify or optimize this? It will say like 500 megabytes of memory, blah, 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 stuff like that. I recommend doing this because this does help loading into areas somewhat faster, and after you've built up the cache again, after playing in general, it basically helps promote better performance for the game itself. So this is what I've got my launcher settings set to. And then we'll actually go into the game, and this is where the bulk of the changes and our options are being made. All right, so now we are going in-game, just gonna put the password in and then log in. Now we're gonna go over our in-game settings. So straight away, escape, options, accessibility. Now there are some changes that I've done to accessibility that are noticed in game. You can make some extra changes yourself. Remember, everything that I'm now going over are basically suggestions if you want the game to look and run the way I have it looking and running. I recommend messing with some things yourself when it comes to like color options and just changing it and making it a little bit more personalized. So the first thing I've got here is visual effect intensity. I've knocked this one down to 70. I believe it was 100 by default, so you can kind of like get an idea of what it's like. If it's at 200, it's like that. If it's 100, you know, it's all flary like that, but I have mine just at 70. That's good enough for me. Reduced teammate visual effects. If I have, say, a Fault and 2 Forbans in my party and they're all spamming their abilities, I don't need my eyes to become victims. Enable screen shake, I have this turned off because I think it looks hideous when I'm moving around in game. Then custom HUD colors, this is where I've got a lot of changes. So like my health color, my shield color and stuff like that while I'm in a mission are somewhat different to what the default would be. I'm not going to go over and hit every single box and show the specific color because we will be here forever, but you can kind of get a general sense of what I've done. So shields normally would be blue, my shields are gray, overshields would be purple, my overshields are white. My buff and debuff icons, I've washed them out just a little bit. I believe when you have invincibility frames, your health also gets grayed out, but I've just kind of like dimmed the red somewhat. I will scroll down and you can just kind of get like an idea of what I've got going on. Critical numbers, yellow, orange and red crits, I've just made them a little bit lighter so they're not as like deep colored. And ability damage would be purple by default. I have mine as a baby blue, and we're just going to keep going down, down, down. You can kind of get a quick idea of what I have. I'm not going over all of it because we will be here forever. Show subtitles enabled, and then I have disabled HUD motion because I don't like my HUD moving around when I'm moving my camera around. I think it looks like shit. Okay, so borderless full screen. This is what I run a game at, and this is generally because I can hit my Windows key and then I can drag any window over top of the game without it minimizing the game. If this is set to full screen, then I can hit the Windows key just fine, but the moment something is dragged over the game, if it's set to full screen, then it will minimize it. Aspect ratio, you should have this to what your monitor's native aspect ratio is, so mine is 16:9. Vertical sync, I recommend you turn this off. Maximum frame rate, you can have this set to whatever you want. It will force the game to render at that frame rate. I have mine set to my monitor's native. Brightness and contrast. Now, I've got my brightness at 48 and my contrast at 53, and this is to somewhat kind of emulate HDR. Now, I do have an HDR compatible monitor, but I will actually get into why I'm not using HDR in-game. This just makes the colors look a little bit better anyway. I recommend messing with this to whatever your taste may be. Build a few, maximum of 90, I have mine set to 90. Show FPS, I have this turned off because you can see in the bottom left, I do have an FPS counter that is a part of ReShade, which is something I will go over in the end. Upscaling. Now this is FSR and DLSS. If you have, say, problems keeping like a pretty high frame rate or something like that, I would recommend using this. The reason why I don't use this, and I probably would use this for general gameplay unless I'm doing like a recording, say Fashion Frame 2024 or a quest, then I would actually have this turned on if I wasn't doing stuff like that. But the reason why I have this turned off is because it forces anti-aliasing to be TAA, and I'll get into why I don't like TAA pretty soon. Geometry, shadow, and texture memory, all three set to high. Geometry quality, if I remember correctly, basically affects the level of detail at distances and the amount of things that are rendered in at a distance. Shadow quality is just so my shadows don't look like squares. Texture memory, my GPU has quite a bit of VRAM, so I let it just go mental with it. Particle system quality and GPU particle quality. If I'm recording quest content like I did with the Whispers in the Walls, I'll actually turn this up to high. For general gameplay, I turn this down to medium. The game still looks perfectly fine. Now, anti-aliasing. I'm actually going to start on SMAA because that's what I have natively anyway, and we're going to show you just what I am having as an issue if I just go over to there. So, what I want you to do is focus on these little wolf heads around my arsenal. The Shroud of Dinar or whatever, I can't remember what they're called. Just focus on these things and this Iron sculpture. Even this little kiddo statue, just focus on this. I'm going to move forward. And you can kind of see them. You can kind of see how they're still like, they're getting the anti-aliasing treatment in movement. And this is with SMAA. Now I'm going to go over to TAA and you're going to see immediately why I hate this. Now, I promise you, no matter what I have TAA sharpening set to, if I have sharpened temporal video effects, no matter what I have set to, I still get this issue. Standing still, everything looks fine. But again, just look at the heads, the wolf heads, the Iron sculpture, the moment I start moving. You see how immediately it gets blurry? You see how everything kind of gets a little bit blurry in movement? Can you see that blur? That's why I don't use TAA. And no matter what I've done, I have spent hours trying to figure this out before. I cannot get that blur to fuck off. So I use SMAA because it is distracting. SMAA is also the reason why I do not use HDR, because if I have HDR enabled on my monitor to use it in game, that forces you to use TAA, which is unfortunate. And you cannot use upscaling, so DLSS or FSR. And say if I wanted it on quality and sharpening, this is what I would have it set to in, say, Cyberpunk 2077. You can see it immediately forces TAA on, and I don't like that, so I use SMAA. If you can use TAA and you notice the blurriness, but you don't really care about it, then I still recommend you use TAA, because it is a better version of anti-aliasing. But I cannot stand it. I notice it too much. It drives me mental. Okay, going down a little bit more. Anisotropic filtering. I have this set to 8 times. This is the maximum. Usually it's 16 in games, but 8 is completely fine. It just makes it so textures at different angles and distances look slightly better and less muddy. Trilinear filtering I have turned off. This is so my textures don't smoothly fade in while they're loading, because it's really distracting to me. Dynamic lighting, volumetric lighting, and local reflections on and on. SSAO quality, I've set this one to high. I want you to look at Umbra, specifically around the torso setting. I'm going to set this to medium and hit confirm. And the moment you hear me hit confirm, just watch like some of the deeper shadows disappear. You see that? That's SSAO, baby. Watch again as I set it back to high. Look at that detail. Volumetric fog quality. When I'm recording quest content, I have this up to high. In general gameplay, I have this set to medium. High shader quality. I want high shader quality, so I have this set on. Motion blur. This is still illegal in 50 different countries. I'm not going to tell you what country that is, so for your safety, have this disabled. Depth of field. You may say to me, this is illegal in 50 different countries. I have this enabled. Basically, when I'm aiming down the sights of a gun, my Warframe and the gun itself become somewhat out of focus, and then all of the focus is emphasized on whatever I'm aiming at. I like this. I turn it on. It's a personal preference thing. Distortions I have turned off. Glare I have enabled. Film grain disabled. Bloom, and I have this set to a specific tasteful 7. I have messed with this particular option longer than I would admit under interrogation, and I have found that 7 is the perfect balance between getting the benefit of seeing bloom without being blinded by bloom. Weapon elemental FX, so your elemental combos that you have on your melee weapons will actually be shown in-game on the blade of the melee weapon itself. I have this turned off. Color correction, when I'm doing quest content, this is turned on. General gameplay, I have this turned off. When you use certain abilities, the color scope of the game is rendered differently temporarily, say when you pull out Exalted Blade. So I have this turned off for general gameplay because I think it looks like shit. But in quest gameplay, I have this turned on because, you know, it's meant to be immersive and all that cinematic stuff. Contact shadows, character shadows, and sun shadows. All 3 of them are enabled because I want all my shadows. Enhanced decals. This one, I can't really remember too much what this did, but I have it enabled. Dynamic resolution. This one I've got disabled because I don't need it, but essentially if you have a older machine that can't really handle the game will dynamically scale down to about 75%. This is a percentage. So it will go down to about 75% of your native resolution. HDR, if you can run this, again, I do recommend HDR because I think Warframe does a pretty good job of it. I have tested it. It looks pretty fucking nice, I would say. But again, it does force TAA, and I've already gone over why I don't like TAA. And interface, custom UI theme. So this is my UI theme, the deadlock theme. This is my color. This is what I'm using recently. Corpus background is just this thing. You only see it here, and you only see it when you're logging in, but that's what I have. And for Vitruvian sounds, this is just like my UI sound and stuff like that. Have it as whatever you want. Item labels, if for some reason this is disabled, you want this enabled, because if I turn this off, you can see Nidus's name has disappeared. This affects guns and relics. So everything is on hover. Please have this enabled. It is a quality of life thing. Mouse cursor, my one all the way down to the bottom of the list, one up to the right. That's what I use. And then my cursor color is just white, and then my scale is a specific 1055. Backing out there, menu scale set to custom. I have it at 70. This is basically this menu that you see that is scaled to 70, and there are some other menus in game. Show HUD, I need my HUD when I'm in game. HUD margins, this is pretty much my HUD margins, you can see that. HUD scale, set all the way down to 100. Enhanced damage numbers with compact damage numbers disabled, because if I hit millions of damage, I want to see the full number because I want my serotonin boost. Damage number scale set to 65 because I don't need the numbers to take up my entire screen. Opacity set to 100 so I can actually see them and make them bold. Show affinity numbers. I recommend having this on, but I'm at the point where if I'm leveling something in Warframe, I already know where I'm going. I don't need to know how much affinity I'm getting because I'm already going to know how much affinity I'm getting. Show player list. I want to know who's in my party. Show teammate glyph instead of icons I have disabled. If you have this disabled, you will actually see the Warframe icon of what they're actually using as their Warframe instead. Show teammate names. I have this enabled so I know who to cuss at in the back of my head when they're taking too long to get to a friendship door. Show ability dots on reticle. This just puts like 4 dots under your reticle, and the one that's highlighted is the ability that you've recently used. This could be like an accessibility thing. I don't use it. Ability banner on cast. When you use an ability, you get a nice little banner in the top middle that tells you the ability that you've used. I don't need that because I'm generally aware of what ability I've used by watching it happen in game. Show enemy names, show health over enemies, I want that on. Use sniper scopes, I turn that on. Prefer overlay map, no idea what that is, but I like what I've got it set to. And landscape overlay map fade, I think this is primarily a open world thing, I just have that to 50. That is how I have my Warframe set up. Now, I did say that I was going to demonstrate what the game looks like for me versus what it would look like for you when you watch it on YouTube. Now, there is one editing thing that I do while I'm editing the video that makes it look somewhat better, which I don't actually see in game, but I do see it in the video after I've rendered it, and you guys see it in the video after I've rendered it. I'm not going to do that particular thing for this video, because otherwise, everything that I've said before here, you're not going to get an accurate representation of what I'm saying. But right now, what you see, 100% is what I see in-game. And right now is what it looks like on YouTube after I've done the editing trick. And now I'm going to get rid of it, and this is what it looks like without the editing trick on YouTube. So basically, it just makes the colors a little bit deeper and the scene a little bit more rich. That's all I do. Now, I do use ReShade in game. I have it disabled at the moment, and I'm going to enable it, and you're going to see the difference between it being enabled and disabled. It is not that significant. For me, I notice it, and that's why I use it, but right now I have it disabled. I'm going to enable it in 3, 2, 1. And all it does is make the scene a little bit warmer, and some of the shadows are a little bit deeper, and it helps add some extra detail to some shadows on characters and stuff like that. So this is with it on again, turning it off, on, off, on, and now I'm just spamming it. That's all it is. Not a big change. This is ReShade at work. I'm not going to tell you how to install ReShade or how to use it. I've just shown you what it does for me. It does exist in some kind of like terms of service gray area. It is a graphical enhancement suite. It does absolutely nothing to game files. It does nothing to game memory. It doesn't let you cheat in any way. It's literally just making the game look a little bit more pretty. I've never heard of anybody being banned because of ReShade. There are Warframe creators on the Warframe Creator program that do Captura and stuff like that use ReShade for their content. In my opinion, there's no problem with it, but I'm not going to advertise it for you. It's just what I use. For 2024 moving forward, this is my complete setup for prettiness and performance in Warframe. So thank you for watching, guys. I hope you found this video informative. If you did and you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like, and please consider subscribing to the channel for more future Warframe content and some variety content in the future. And I will see you in the next video. What emote do we have bound today? Okay. Alright, that's the emote that we're ending on. I'll see you in the next video, guys.